How's everyone doing this morning?
I'm good, man. Excited.
Yeah.
Been up for a few hours. Just kind of tweaking, the last part of this presentation, which I think came out nicely.
Cool.
What I'm about to share and what I've been sharing over the last couple of weeks is stuff that I do every day with my clients, except that I didn't have it in a way that is tangible. And when the time came for me to speak, I was frightened. I was like, what am I gonna? I know what I need to talk about, but the process of converting my knowledge into PowerPoints seemed like a daunting task. But but when I did the first one, I realized, wait a minute. As I was thinking through that, I was like, I look at the layout of the presentations on the business of business, the business vitals. And I said, wait a minute, this is a book in the making. This is my knowledge in a box that I can turn around and productize it. So what I'm doing over the next few weeks is I'm going to tell you my knowledge, distill it in a way that is easily digestible, relatable points that I hope you can follow in a way that is, not the traditional way of looking at a business. And I hope you get a lot out of it. And just like I got a lot out of it by putting it down in paper. So thank you all for letting me do this. I don't say it enough. Thank you.
And
so you're welcome.
You're
grateful
welcome.
as well. Okay. All right. So with your permission, I'm going to go ahead and start.
Okay. So this is we're going to do this as if it was a live webinar. You've got 400 people that have signed up for the launch of the new book, and they're going to talk about Leo's, whatever the new book is.
Hey, Leo, I have some comments about your presentation last week and how it impacted me. You want me to share that or no?
Actually, you were you reading my slides? I was about to do a recap from last week, Joe. So by all means.
Okay. You want me to? So basically, one of the things that I realized last week was just and understanding what my situation was. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast in the year 2000 to expand our trading firm. We had a proprietary trading firm in institutional trading, and from 2000 to 2005, I moved out to the West Coast, did all the demographics, and figured out where we should be and the opportunity. And I went back and this is back in 2000. I went back and I presented it to the company and went for it, and from 2000 to 2005, we expanded from no offices to 12 offices throughout the whole West Coast. I had 400 people working for me in that almost 6-year period. In 2003, in the middle of that, we got acquired by a Fortune 500 company called SunGard Data Systems, and they kept me on in a position as the regional manager, because I really had the pulse on everything that was happening and everything that I actually personally created, in the West Coast, and they were on the East Coast as well, the acquiring company. So fast forward to 2010. 2010, they made an announcement that they were going to exit the business. We had 2,000. Customers that relied on us every day, every second the market was open, they relied on us, and we had over 100 employees, and they made an announcement that they were going to do an orderly shutdown of the business operation over a 3-month period. So basically that ensued chaos ensued. From there, the orderly shutdown turned into 3 months of chaos, and myself and a few other people that were in the business decided, these guys are crazy. This business is still making money. So me and my infinite wisdom, I went out and started my own broker-dealer and invested a lot of my own money in it. And long story short was these guys, because they were analyzing the numbers, And that's what they did. They were analyzers. You know, they were a private equity company. They analyzed the numbers. They saw the trend. They saw the writing on the wall. And, you know, I had a pulse on the market and things that were happening, but it was more intuitive. It was more intuition. I didn't really know the numbers that they knew. I didn't know the actual profit margins down, you know, down to a T. I had a pulse on more of the operating piece of the business. And, you know, it turns out that a couple $100,000 later, and you know, I figured out that these guys were smarter than I was. And really what made them smarter than me was they crunched the numbers. They knew the numbers, they knew the pattern, they knew the margins to a T, and they exited the business right on time. They exited the business. I mean, and now this is a bigger enterprise, of course, but even if you take that down to the smaller business owner, you know, I was thinking about the things you were talking about last week, the vitals, and you know, knowing the margins, not only where they are today, but being able to analyze the trend. You know, where is this? My margins are going from, you know, 10% to 8% to, you know, maybe they go back to 9% one year. But if you look at the overall trend, you know, this isn't going well. It's time to get out of this business, or it's time to make a change, or it's time to do something. And I was, I guess, you know, a victim of that, in the sense that, you know, I wasn't privy to the numbers that they had, and I wasn't analyzing the numbers, you know, the way they were, you know. And I thought I was smarter than them. Apparently I wasn't. So that was my experience that I related to when I looked at, you know, your presentation last week.
Well, thank you, Joe. There's no better endorsement than personal experience. You know, you can read all about gross margin and profit margins, you know, net margins in the book, but you know, it's hard to connect until it happens to you. So Joe speaks from personal experience. I'm going to speak to you from personal experience, and that's great, Joe. Thank you so much. It sort of brings it to life. So last week, we talked about business vital number 1, profitability, the blood pressure of your business. So today we talk about productivity. So what happened last week when we talked about profitability, and what Joe is talking about, is very easily you take your eyes off the blood pressure of your business for a couple of quarters. Before you know it, things may be going out of control. So today we're going to add to that. We're going to talk about productivity, which is the business vital number 2. So this is part 2, productivity, the business cholesterol test.
Somebody's got some health issues, I think.
Just work with me, John. So just like before, John, I'm going to start with some questions. How is your cholesterol? Silence. Actually, I was out of the country for a while, so when I first came back, the first thing I wanted to do is to check everything. The whole panel, blood work, the whole, you know, physical blood work. And I was had been concerned for some time about my cholesterol, that it was borderline 200. And you would think that with all the stress that I had, my cholesterol, you know, being abroad and coming back to the US would have been a problem. Something happened though there, that my cholesterol was much lower than before. And that to me is a miracle. And I was started to deconstruct, how did I get good cholesterol? So what happened in prior years, and that process, I stopped eating a lot of junk food. First, we didn't have the money, but then I stopped going to McDonald's and all those places. And then I started eating more at home, but I didn't think I was doing it for the cholesterol. We were actually on a tight budget. But the byproduct of that was my cholesterol went down. So when was the last time you had it checked? It may have been last week for some of us, last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It doesn't really matter. But it matters to the degree that you care about your health. And I'm sure all of us at this point in our lives, if you're married and you have children, you got to care about your health. So let me show you this chart here. Can you guys see this screenshot?
Yes.
Okay. So this is sort of what the doctor shows you, right? You're sitting in at the doctor's office, and well, let me talk to you about your cholesterol. When the doctor says that, it's never good, right? So it's like, okay, here he goes. And you notice that there is an age-appropriate cholesterol, and you notice that as you get older, you're starting to see this very high columns and high sort of be more predominant, and the margin for error as you get older begins to become lower and lower, right? Hence, you really have to take care of your cholesterol. I think blood pressure first, cholesterol second. Your cholesterol reading is the sum of two numbers. LDL, that stands for low density cholesterol, and the HDL, that is high density cholesterol. Now, I know that there's no doctors in the room. It may be so, but I don't think so. So I'll try to be as forthright as giving you as much detail as I can. So LDL is the bad cholesterol. That's the one to look out for. HDL is the good cholesterol. For most people, the good cholesterol is very low, and the bad cholesterol is very high. Can I get a show of hands? No, don't do that. So what do these numbers matter? This is what can happen if your LDL cholesterol remains high for a long period of time. Hence, you're not checking it and doing nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we don't want that. Which can lead to, right? I don't want that to be me at the age of 50, right? You don't want that, period. If you don't want that for your health, why would you want that for your business? Productivity is the business cholesterol test. There are several ways to check the cholesterol in your business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get into the details, I'm sorry, somebody had a question? Okay, no. Know this. This is one of my all-time favorite quotes when it comes to business. I'm sure you've heard it. What got you here won't get you there, by Marshall Goldsmith. Who read the book, by the way?
I've read it.
Yeah, it's a very good book. Eye-opening. It was really ahead of its time. So how do you think differently about the productivity in your business? There lies the question today. I'm gonna go ahead and do my best to answer it. First things first. Today, I want you to make a paradigm shift. What you thought you knew about business, I want you to open up your mind and consider a new paradigm. Let's think for a minute. What are the two biggest expenses in your business? Volunteers?
Rent and payroll.
Payroll.
Bingo. Rent and payroll. Who said that in that order? That was you, Steve, right?
Yes.
Very
Steve
good.
knows. Steve is running a business.
He's keenly aware of it, right? You know what your check is. You know how much is coming out of your checking account every 2 weeks or bi-monthly for payroll, and you know what you're writing for rent. So really two large numbers depending on the size of your business. There's not much you can do about the rent. Is that fair to say? You negotiate a 5-year lease. Hopefully you got a very good deal, low CAM, or modified gross. And but there's a lot you can do about payroll. Most entrepreneurs have a fascination with hire. It never fails. I used to be one of them. Hire, hire, hire. We all want to have teams like this. Hooray, Leo, come on. John, you're the best boss I ever had. Steve, oh, can I just bring my mother and my uncle and brothers and sisters to come and work for us? We will all get along and have a great time working for you. How about this group, right? The more the merrier. Let's have one big happy family. Everybody, doing great things for the company. And some of us envision ourselves in an auditorium talking to our employees. How about this? I know, I've been there. I was one of those guys. Most entrepreneurs think the more is better. Wrong. That's all thinking. AKA what got you here type of thinking. Number of employees is no longer a measure of success. More employees means more staff meetings. Can you relate? Do you know what most employees think of staff meetings?
Waste of time.
Okay, anybody else? A lot of the same, right? The face that you make when you know there's a staff meeting, it doesn't look too excited. How about this one? Don't forget, staff meeting today at 11. I've heard of a business's death by meeting, death by staff meeting. Have you guys heard of that?
Oh yeah, I've been
There's
there.
Yeah, 4 or 5 meetings a day will kill you. It's not what the doctor orders. Remember this? Who remembers what this is called?
That's your boiling frog.
That's the boiling frog syndrome. Slowly adding more employees to the mix will solve the problem. Whoever thought that?
Hey, Leo.
Yes.
Did you ever have a meeting for, about the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, this is funny, but that was the joke at Dell. You went to the meeting, and then the next literally 2 hours was the meeting after the meeting to try to figure out what the meeting was about. And it was just, I mean, that was day after day after day. And I don't understand how Dell did it. I mean, yes, you could make the point they've really had to transition, and I think that's a big piece of it. But yeah, the meeting after the meeting, I mean, that's so typical.
You know what? Actually, I do have a story to tell. I'm glad you brought that up, and that's not something I had originally thought of with this slide. But Dell had an epiphany of sorts back in the 90s. The CFO of Dell talked to Michael Dell. He says, "Hey, I got some numbers to show you." So he brought in the P&L, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flow. He says, "What do you want to show me?" He says, "Notice the statement of cash flows. Notice the balance sheet. Do you see anything wrong with that?" So he says, "Well, what am I missing?" He goes, "We only have enough payroll to last us 2 months, and then we're out of money, and we cannot raise any more capital." So Dell, at some point, was within 2 months of shutting its doors down. Can you imagine having 10,000 employees and being out of money to pay payroll? Can you imagine what goes in the mind of the CEO? You think they'll keep you up at night? So they devised a scheme, and this really was what is sort of trailblazing. This was new thinking. The CFO suggested to Michael Dell that prior to that moment, they have built the computers, right, and they had them on stock. Then when somebody paid for it, whether online, it used to be over the phone, right? You used to buy a computer over the phone. What a concept back in the 90s. Then they started buying online, but you would order, so they would take it out of inventory and mail it, and then they would get paid. They said, "No, we're thinking about it the wrong way. What can we do differently?" And you can back me up on this, John. But then he said, "No, we're doing it wrong. We're spending money first and collecting later. Let's collect the money first, get the specs from the client, then let's use that money to build a computer that we will later ship." So within 2 quarters of that time, Dell went from having enough payroll to meet 2 months of, enough money for 2 months of payroll with about $30 million to $100 million in the bank. How did they do that? By thinking differently about the problem.
Let me just add to that, because I was there during the time. Literally what would happen when they made that transition is they would order their components from Intel. They'd order their CPUs and stuff from Intel. Intel would back the semi to the factory warehouse. Dell would not take delivery of that until the orders were ready. They'd pop the lock on the semi truck and put assemble the computers. And at that point, that's when they took delivery and paid Intel. I mean, it was literally just in time. I mean, the whole concept of just in time manufacturing was really innovated, and it was amazing to watch how they would do it.
And by the way, John, it seems to be having problems with your mic. You might want to just check it. But to John's story, it was revolutionary. What a concept, right? Nobody thought before. Let's collect first and provide the service or the product later. But that really became what story, that was a story that this is what people talk about at Harvard Business School now. These are case studies, well-known case studies, but it was revolutionary at the time. So let's move on. Most business owners, in my experience, think that more employees will solve more problems. That by throwing more employees at the problem will somehow make the problem go away. That's boiling frog thinking. More is not always better. I'm living proof of that. I used to have a company with 500 employees. I thought that was a measure of success. So I kept hiring more until I had to let them all go. That was not fun at all. That day was March 26, 2012. So what's the solution? Make a shift from a cost center mentality, AKA the all Dell, to a profit center mentality. Go from a cost center driven business to a profit center driven business. It's so much easier in 2015 to implement strategies to help your business go from a cost center driven mentality to a profit center, that it will stun the mind if you just know what you're looking for. So today I want to open up your mind to the way you see your business when it comes to productivity. Bottom line, all employees must generate revenue. I wish I would have known this sooner. Okay, have you guys heard the concept of a cost center? I think if you work for a Fortune 500 company or even a Fortune 1000, any employee that is generating in excess of $100 million a year will have in their P&L provisions for a cost center. They'll say, well, HR is a cost center, accounting is a cost center. They'll say research and development is a cost center because it inherently doesn't produce any money. But that's the wrong way of looking at the business. What I'm going to teach you today is that every employee could generate revenue. How much revenue, you're asking? A whole lot more than what you pay them. So the expectation is, and this is what I talk to my clients about day in and day out, is what you pay your employees equal to what they're bringing in or more? If not, we need to do something about it. Productivity, number one, business cholesterol, revenue per employee, also known as RPE. And the number we're going to talk about too, the second one is turnover rate, short TOR. So today we're going to spend time talking about RPE and TOR. Forgive me for the acronyms, but it's just easier when I'm writing them down. So what's the right strategy? You maximize RPE, you increase good TOR, which we're going to talk about, and you decrease bad TOR, which is increase good turnover rate, and decrease bad turnover rate. In other words, hire and train profit centers, fire cost centers, rinse and repeat. Simple enough? Here's why you need to make the shift immediately. I want to talk to you about the true cost of an employee. This is the average employee. Do you know exactly what you're getting out of every employee in exchange for 40 hours? You pay them a week? The answer is most don't. Would it surprise you to know that most business owners have no clue? I run into this every week. I'll talk to somebody who doesn't know about this. The true cost of an employee is at least 25% than the pay rate. Let me break it down for you. Payroll taxes from the top, it's 12%. That's average, right? So as your business becomes a little more mature, it may go down to 11.5, but it won't change much. You know, the government wants their money, the state wants their money. That's what makes the government go around. So let's say you have benefits, which now is necessary. It's no longer a luxury, but a necessity to give benefits to your employees. So if you have benefits, add another 7%. Okay, so you hire them, they're working for you, you gotta have something for them to sit on. You have to have a desk, a phone, etc. So if you provide a work area, which means you have to have bigger rent, right? You have to have bigger office space. Then At some point, 1,000 square feet is not enough. You're going to need 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 square feet to accommodate all the employees that you may not need. Then you got the phone system, conference room, etc. You add another 6%. This is average numbers, right? Some companies have it higher than 25%. These are all additional costs. This, on the average, adds up to 25% increase in payroll costs. Now, can you imagine if you had a payroll of $100,000 a month, how much money you're paying in hidden costs for your employees?
Now, Leo, I want to make clear this you're talking about in addition to the salary. So if you're paying someone, if you're paying someone $100,000, for example, the true cost is $125,000 is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Right.
This is in addition to their pay rates.
Right.
So when you hire someone and you say, hey, welcome to, I'm very happy that you're going to join the team, and I'm making you an offer for $10 an hour. Welcome to the team. You're going to start orientation next week. That $10 an hour is really more than that. And we're going to get into that. That's a good point, Joe. So it's 25% above and beyond their pay rate. Right. And it adds up quickly. So if you pay someone $10 an hour, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys have been following the news. This is as of last week. There is a new measure in the House, State Senate, in the House and the Senate in California to systematically raise the minimum wage from what it is today, $9 to $15 by 2020. $15 an hour at some point will be the minimum wage in the state of California. Now, there are cities today that I already have a minimum wage of $15, San Francisco being one of them, leading the pack in employee entitlement. Okay.
Now, these numbers, Leo, are for a small business pretty much, but in the corporate world, it's more like 40% because you have all your benefits and your additional,
Correct. And this is there are companies like Facebook that are rolling over in cash that are paying for babysitting, sending you to the movies, sending you to Europe to train. But for every Facebook, there is 1,000 companies, not like Facebook, right? Only one Facebook out of 1,000 for every company, and there's 50 million businesses in the U.S. And as I talked to you about last week, 90% will go out of business within the first 5 years. 50% will run out of cash within the first 18 months. Are you starting to see some connections here between payroll and a lot of businesses going down? They run out of cash. Not everybody's Dale that can actually raise capital, and even Dale was about to go out of business at some point. So what you're actually paying is $12.50 an hour. Most business owners are not thinking about that. So what do, guys? What do? They keep hiring employees. Right? Eye-opening, right? So an employee making $15 an hour, which eventually will be the new low, I have news for you. So even for those living in Texas, this is inevitable. You start thinking about your costs of payroll now rather than 3 years from now. An employee making $15 an hour is actually costing you $18.75 an hour. So when you think you're paying $600 a week, what you're really paying is $750 a week. Do you see how these numbers can add up very quickly? So that administrative assistant that you thought was going to solve all your problems, that you hired at $15 an hour, that you thought were paying $31,000 a year, it's really costing you $39,000 a year. That's a whopping $8,000 more dollars a year. Where is the money going to come from? Do you see why you need to start thinking differently about your business? Otherwise, what's going to happen to you? You're gonna boil to death. No more business, no more frog. Revenue per employee. Revenue per employee to me is the number one. This is how I go into every business and assess productivity. I want to know what's the revenue per employee immediately, and I want to write that down. It's a measure of how efficiently a particular company is utilizing its employees. It's about utilization. So in general terms, relatively high revenue per employee is a positive sign. I wouldn't say relatively. This is actually the definition in Wikipedia. I will say 99.99% of the time, that's the case. unless you have lawsuits you're dealing with and product related, malpractice or whatever. But a company that has a high amount compared to their peers of revenue per employee will be around for a while. That's the goal, right? Businesses are sold, as I talked about last week, for multiples of cash flow. You have no cash flow. You won't be able to sell a business for millions. Revenue per employee. So how do you measure that? There are many ways, and it goes beyond the scope of this presentation, but I'm going to talk to you about the top 3. Number of hours billed. If you're in the service industry, this is what law firms do. They require their lawyers to bill 2,000 hours a year. But then you're wondering, wait a minute, well, that's how many hours? That's 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, right? When are they going to do anything else? Well, what happens to a young lawyer? They work 80 hours a week to bill 40 hours a week, right? But there's a reason why they have this 2,000 billable hours, because they measure revenue per employee. The same as in the staffing industry. Also, number of units sold. If you're not in the service industry, but you are in the manufacturing industry, you want to know how many units are being sold by employee. A number of deals closed. Let me give you an example. Revenue per employee is calculated by dividing the firm's revenue by its total number of workers. So thus revenue divided into number of employees. So if you're at a run rate of about 50 million a year, which I hope some of you guys will be someday, and we're having those big problems, big dollars, big checking accounts, and some of you may be, and you have 312 employees, so your revenue per employee is $160,000 and 256 per year. Now, is that a good thing? It really depends on a lot of factors. Depends on your industry, depends on your margins. But do you see how all of your numbers start working together? Your gross margin and your net margin working with your productivity rates, your revenue per employee, it starts to tell you a story. So if I'm the doctor looking at your business, I start to see some trends. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Good. So what is your revenue per employee year to date? Do you know that number? And if you don't, I would encourage you to find out. And I hope you're happily surprised. By the way, there are industry standards, averages. The Department of Labor produces numbers. There's tons of data out there. Figure out what your competitors, what the average per industry is, per revenue per employee. You can find that information and measure yourself against your peers. Chances are, if you have a very high revenue per employee, you're going to have a high net margin, return, net operating income. So do you want to grow your business? Just managing your RPE alone can double the size of your business in 1 year. Turnover rate is the number of employees that left the company divided by the number of employees hired at any given year. Do you know your turnover rate? Well, just like in cholesterol, there's good TOR, there's bad turnover rate. So there's good turnover rate and there's bad turnover rate. Take a guess which is the good turnover rate. Come on, not all at once. Okay, don't worry. I got the answer for you. John, I thought you were ready to jump in.
There we go. I'm going to go low turnover is good.
Okay, you're right. Okay, that's good. Pretty intuitive. Good turnover rate is cost-centered turnover, AKA getting rid of bad employees. Who has, raise your hand, and I've had this before, who has employees that you've been thinking about getting rid of, but they're still sitting on your payroll for A, B, or C reason? All of us have at least one.
I'm a solopreneur, so that I only have one person that I can look at.
Don't fire yourself then, or you'll be out of business.
Exactly.
And so you have to become a really good revenue producing employee, right?
That's right.
Or the CEO of your house, AKA your wife, will fire you. So so that turnover rate is when your profit center is high in turnover. Okay. Good employees leaving you faster than you hire them. Okay. What I've seen in
hang on just a second. Can you just kind of clarify the difference between cost center turnover and profit center turnover?
Well, when you have employees that are not generating revenue and bringing your average down, and you know they're not good, you're not dealing with bad employees, you're not doing constructive corrective discipline, you're not writing them up, you're not counseling them, you're not getting rid of them, it's going to affect your numbers. So cost center turnover, it has to be a very high number, which means you have to be turning over the bad employees. I will get into that a little in a couple more slides, John. But the good employees, you don't want to get rid of. But guess what happens to most employers? They lose their good employees. You know why? Because they get tired of seeing their fellow employees who are not producing sticking around the company. Good people attract good people. Bad people attract bad people. Does that sound familiar? It's a culture thing in your company. That's not good. You want to keep good employees forever? Quickly get rid of bad employees. So I'm going to explain this a little more. So say you hired 10 good employees but had to replace 5 that left. Now, I am assuming that you know they're good employees because you're looking at their numbers, you're looking at their revenue, you're minding, you're inspecting what you are expecting from the 7 good habits or highly effective people. Inspect what you expect. Most of us business owners are not doing that. So if you hire 10 good employees but have to replace 5 that left, what is your profit center turnover rate? Do you think it's going to be high? 50%? Is that good?
No.
No. Which is easier, to go ahead and hire a new employee you know nothing about, or to keep a good employee?
Keep the good one.
What is easier, to keep a good paying customer than to acquire a new one?
Well, I would say not easier, but what's more cost effective?
Well, it depends,
Okay.
right? It depends. But I've seen good employees leave mediocre firms for better companies. Okay? Now, I hold the CEO responsible for that. Because you should know your numbers. You should create an environment in which good people thrive. And how you do that? How do you do that? Engagement. And that's a whole 2 more presentations after that. But just know that there's 2 types of turnover rates, and you keep an eye on both. Just like cholesterol, LDL and HDL. So say you hire 10 bad employees, and I hope you know by now which are the bad employees, right? I had a situation with a client that the employee, when my client was showing up to work every day, at 8:30, all employees were there at 8:30. Guess what happens when my client was on vacation for a week? Half the employees didn't show up till 10, 11 o'clock. What do we do about that? Well, inspect what you expect. So what we're gonna do in this particular case, we're gonna install a timekeeping software, right? Unfortunately, I had to tell you that in a lot of companies, when the cat is out, the mice are playing. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
So you gotta pay attention to your business. That's what you mean working on your business, not in the business. Managing from a command center. There's a lot of books that talk about, managing from command posts. And to have a command post, you gotta have data to look at. And this is part of the data. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna give you more data to look at. Is this helping you guys? Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. So what's your cost center turnover rate in this particular case? 20%. Is that good? I see John is scratching his head. Hoping
It looks like you still have 10 bad employees, so you didn't really solve any problems.
So I want to make you think. Okay? So here's in a nutshell when it comes to turnover. Good turnover, equal cost center turnover. The higher, the better. Essentially, you want your turnover for the bad employees to be 100% every year. You don't carry bad employees from year to year. The bad turnover is the profit center turnover. The lower, the better. Right? You want not to lose. You want 0. You don't want to lose good employees. especially, and there's the worst part, when they go to your next door competitor and they start taking business away from you. Legally, you cannot stop an employee from competing against you, right? They cannot take your clients if they know any clients. They cannot steal your clients, but you cannot stop an employee from competing against you because of fair trade competition laws. So what's the moral to this story is that you keep an eye on your business cholesterol on a regular basis. Questions?
In any of your companies, whether that you've run or you've consulted, how much insight to the business have you given to the employees, and does that help? Right? Because I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, we're not talking about good and bad people. We're talking about good and bad employees. So they may be a great person, but they're a bad employee. So how much insight have you given to the employees so they know what makes a good employee?
Well, I think knowledge is power. You know, you first lay it out. Whenever I go and do an initial consult, you know, or an audit of a business, and I start asking all these questions, you know, I want to know their gross margin, the net margin. I want to know the utilization rates, you know, the AKA, the revenue per employee. You know, I want to know their turnovers. What am I asking all that? I want to know what I'm working with.
Yeah.
So if the numbers tell me a story, and then I realize I want to know how much communication are these employees being held to the standard? Do you have a company culture? Is there an employee handbook? Are you writing up? Are you commending the good employees? Are you rewarding good employees and not rewarding the bad employees? What are you doing? So I ask a lot. It usually takes me about a month, John, to really assess the culture before I suggest anything. There's a ton of questioning that goes on. So at some point, let me give you one particular example. I had a situation in which I was communicating, which I thought was confidentially sensitive information with the CEO of a company. It turns out, for some reason, employees were looking at his email. So what happens that it makes for an awkward meeting, right?
Yeah.
I found out accidentally and immediately corrected the problem. I could not have a secure line of communication with the CEO until I fixed some things, and we had to fix some community, some security, some IT challenges that they had. But I want to include there's a point in time that I have a meeting with the employees and tell them the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is hey guys, and it may be, have you guys seen this show, The Prophet?
Yeah.
Okay, when he actually goes and actually tells everybody, hey, we might have some bad news here. You know, we may have to shut the doors down if we don't change, right?
Right.
So I think you use discretion, John, but as much as you can talk to them about what's really going on, in my experience, they want to help. Most employees want to be good employees. Maybe about 10% don't, but most don't. And the reason why good employees leave is because they're not equipped, they're not empowered to do a better job.
Yeah.
So again, knowledge is power, right? Now I'm giving you business vital number 2 that you can go ahead and turn around and use it. I'll be happy to talk to you guys offline. If anybody has any questions, I would love to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. And I definitely think that, it is possible to turn a bad employee into a good employee by giving them a defined role in writing, what their goals are, what their a lot of employees are just coming in and there's really no clear outline, what am I supposed to be doing every day, or and that falls on, the CEO or the supervisor or whoever is up the upline. But so I do think there's opportunity to go in there and create these defined roles and then reassess again.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think what I find myself as of late doing is really establishing protocols and rules of engagement for companies. In some cases, it may be that I write up employee manuals, an employee handbook and standard operating procedure. You write up employees that are not performing. You commend those that are doing a good job. You praise the ones that are doing great. That you wanna reward the behavior that you want replicated, and you want to discourage the bad behavior from happening again. And the way you do this, clear expectations. So you have, a lot of companies don't have job descriptions for their employees. And in some cases, the CEO knows everything, and if the CEO doesn't show up to work, nothing happens.
Right.
I will talk to you later about, one of the concepts that I'm helping clients is dress up your company for success so you can be acquired. I know how venture capitalists think. I know how VCs think. I've met many of them from some of the largest companies. I know what they're looking for. They're looking for self-sustaining businesses that they can get a premium that they're generating excess cash, what we call throwaway money.
Yeah.
A business that is generating at least 50% EBITDA, right? That the owner is in Alaska fly fishing for 3 months, and then he goes back and goes to Paris, France, and then for another 2 months, shows up to the business once a day when he's in town. Do you think that business is worth a premium to a potential buyer?
You bet.
Right. So what you want to create is a business that can actually run without you. And this is really what I'm leading you toward, is start thinking strategically about your business. Don't think that if you keep doing the same thing over and over, new things are going to happen. I want to change your paradigm, and I want to change it in a way that is going to, digestible, bite-sized pieces. And this is what I do with customers. And this is what I've been trying to put down on paper. This is what the next book is all about. Yeah. Really helping business owners understand their numbers, understand their business vitals so they can be sold for millions.
Excellent.
Well, thank you guys. I hope I did you right.
Well, you gave us a lot of really good information, and can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent presentation. And I think, one of the things that just continues to resonate is think with the end in mind. Whether or not you're going to sell tomorrow in 10 years, that doesn't matter, but you need to be thinking as if you're going to sell this business tomorrow. And what would someone else buy this from? And when you have that in your mind, it creates a whole lot of clarity for running your business, and you're going to be better for it. Your customers are going to get more value out of it. Your employees, the whole 9 yards, are going to work when you really have that in your mindset from the get-go. Is why would someone buy this business?
Well said, John. And I think that's a really big takeaway, is begin with the end in mind. What do you want to do about your business, and go do it. And I think we're all here to support you. We're support each other. And I think we can all have terrific businesses that can eventually provide for your families.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. John, any closing comments?
No, I think it was great. And I'll give a little preview. We're working on another special guest, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. Leo, that you introduced us to, he actually is here in Austin, and he's got a phenomenal story. And so maybe we'll be able to have him on. And then I'll just kind of tease with that. So, hey, I think it's great. And everyone have a fantastic week and enjoy your day.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Everyone.